Hi, everyone. Happy Monday. Happy Monday. I'm in a new space in my house today. Please let me know that you can hear me, that you can see me. Give me some good thumbs up. Let me know where you're from. Let me know how you're feeling today. Just everyone, give me an update. If you guys have never met me before, hi. My name's Deborah Lee Smith, and I'm an actor, a filmmaker in Los Angeles, and a mental health advocate. Hi. Hi, Shannon. Lovely to see you. So if you guys have never done this, these lives with me before, I like to always have kind of a topic that I know that I'm going to be discussing, but then I also very much just respond to how everyone is doing and just checking in with everyone as well. So feel free to always, be part of the conversation here. Hey, Ted. Lovely to see you. Some of my regulars. Hi, Ang. Ang? Is that how you say it? Hi. Christopher, Lisa, Melanie. Hi, everyone. Doing okay overall. Good. How's everyone else feeling today? So feeling pretty great today. That's awesome, Brock. I'm so glad to hear that. Wonderful. Wonderful. Hi, Claire. Lovely to see you. So if you guys have never done one of these with me before, I do them every other Monday. I actually did one also last Monday because just the way that things worked out. So my next live, though, will be in 2 weeks from today. Shannon, why are you feeling bummed? And hi, Lisa. You're exhausted from a high stress week last week. I feel you, Lisa. I'm feeling very much the same. And I want to talk, hi, Jessica. Happy Monday. The conversation for today or my topic for today that I kind of want to dive into is the idea that basically let's talk. I want to talk about the after effects of COVID and everyone coming back into some semblance of normal and how that's affecting everyone. I was listening to a podcast yesterday about brain health and how much COVID has negatively affected brain health. And I thought that because of that, this would be a really interesting topic for us to discuss today, is like how much COVID is affecting us long term. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, Ted. So you had a great weekend. You fought hard to go to a baseball game. I'm so glad that you went to the baseball game. That's great. And they won. Bonus. That's like all you need. Jesse, you were hospitalized for 2 days. I'm so sorry. I'm glad that you are out. I'm glad that you are here with us. That's so wonderful. So thank you for checking in. And George, good afternoon to you from the UK. Yeah, so if you guys have never done this with me before, as I said in the beginning, so I'm an actor and a filmmaker and a mental health advocate. So I'm not a licensed practitioner, therapist, psychiatrist, any of those kind of things. It's more that like I love listening to different things about mental health and mental health journeys, and then sharing them with you all. So this is that's what I'm gonna do today is talk to you a little bit about this podcast episode. Yeah. So I before I like jump into some of the things that I heard on this episode, I'm curious if anyone has had some like long lasting effects, whether you've had COVID or whether you just, we all, I feel, whether we had COVID or not, have had some really, like profound, like it definitely had a huge impact on us over the last year and a half. And I'm curious how everyone's feeling on an emotional level as we're getting back into the world. Yes, Jessica, it is definitely a really important topic. You've been hearing a lot of buzz around the topic of re-entering the world. Yeah. I mean, excuse me. I know one thing that like I'm really struggling with right now is the idea of setting boundaries for myself. I've really enjoyed this past year, like spending time with myself and not and just taking time to kind of sit with myself and understand myself really well. And I think that as we're re-entering the world, I'm starting to go away from that some and starting to overbook myself with like the people that I see and stuff. And that's really hard because I think it's really important to just like get to know yourself and like give yourself some space to breathe. Yeah. So Lisa, you said your anxiety levels have spiked for weeks now, and Clara says anxiety around crowds is what you've noticed most. Yeah, definitely, and overwhelm. Absolutely. I mean, all of those things, I 100% agree. They're huge, huge impact. On our emotional and physical state. And I think that it completely makes sense when we are talking about anxiety. This is something I've talked about before, and obviously, like, I'm sure that this is not new news, but like when it comes to anxiety, it's your body's automatic response um to what's going on in the world. So like when we were cave people and when we lived in caves, and whenever we were like in social groups, if you were like left alone or if you were not with the group, that would cause a lot of anxiety because if you were alone, then you were more likely to be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger than if you were with a group. So that's why we often have like the idea of like communal living, or like having a community around you is so important because it really like speaks to that core. But I think that just in general, there's so many different things that we kind of get used to. Like, we're really incredible, people, the way that we can just get used to, different things in our lives. And then when we kind of get ripped out of those things again, it takes a little bit of time to acclimate ourselves again. Jessica says, I've strangely had anxiety around speaking with others without the mask on, and it's a bizarre sensation that you're not used to it. Yes, I completely agree, Jessica. I've actually had a very similar experience recently. I feel like I'm like there was something really kind of, I don't know, settling about the idea that you were that I like didn't have to completely show my emotions, that I could kind of hide things a little bit more when I was, speaking with people. And so now that I'm, back in the world and I'm not wearing a mask, I definitely have found that as well, where sometimes I just get really overwhelmed by that. So Laura says, I feel like I have a lot less stamina in social situations. It's easier to feel overwhelmed. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of what I was saying before, Laura. I completely agree. I feel like I am, and I really missed people, and so I've like kind of like thrown myself back into meeting people and like into society like really strongly, and then realized that I actually need to pace myself a little bit so that I'm not overwhelming myself. Hi, Elias. It's wonderful to see you. Elias is one of our regulars here. And George says, I cannot go out without my mask on. Seeing others not wearing one unsettles you a bit. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but myself, George, I certainly am still wearing a mask, obviously where it is required, obviously, but even where it's not required, I think that it's a sign of respect in some ways, and a sign of just like, yeah, giving people some space. I completely agree, Claire. Like, people are also very unaware of personal space, and I think that was already kind of an issue previously, and now that's just become exacerbated. So that completely resonates with me as well. So going back to what I was saying before, and this was really interesting. This is kind of why I wanted to start this conversation today, was that I was listening to this podcast yesterday, and he's a brain surgeon, and he's a psychiatrist, and he does a lot of his work and a lot of studies about brains and how much our brain health affects our mental health and affects our body health, like all of those kinds of things. And I think that sometimes, he was talking about how sometimes we think that our brain is just like a part of our body, which of course it is, obviously. But I think that it's really important to also like put extra emphasis on our brains, because even though it takes up 2% of our body mass, it takes up like 30% of our oxygen and 30% of our calories. So it takes up a huge amount of our body's resources for our brain to actually function. And that's why, like what they say as far as like you are what you eat is so important, because whatever you're ingesting is actually like very strongly affecting your brain. But what he was saying in relation to COVID was that actually he is seeing, with people that he's studying, that he is seeing a 20% rise this year in schizophrenia and dementia and other different like specific diseases that have to do with the brain, as or they may not necessarily be like they may not necessarily be diagnosable yet, but he's seeing the starts of that. Basically, he's starting to see the infection in people who've had COVID, that brain infection is eventually going to cause those things. And so, he was talking about what you can do to prevent that and what you can do to just keep your brain as healthy as possible for as long as possible. And one of the biggest things is, your diet, again, like what you eat, making sure that you are, trying to put healthy food in your body, as well as exercise and vitamin D. He was saying how, of course, it's important to wear sunscreen, all of those things, but it's also really, really important to just be out in the sun, because vitamin D is really needed, for brain health. I know, George, isn't that scary? It's quite a terrifying idea, but it just, again, as he said, like it is all of these things, like it is treatable, like it is something that we can prevent. And it's just like making sure that we're taking care of our brain specifically, just as any other, part in our body. And of course, this directly relates to mental health, because if you have an infection in your brain, it's very possible that the chemical imbalance in your brain is going to be off, and therefore it's going to lead to all sorts of other different mental health difficulties. So it's definitely, all these things are all tied together. Just going back to the mask thing. Yeah, Glenn, I completely agree. He says, last week I forgot to put my mask on getting gas. I apologized to the clerk. You felt like you walked in the store naked. Yeah, absolutely. I know. It's so funny that like this thing that we weren't even really wearing or wasn't a part of our lives a year and a half ago is now something that feels like I feel naked if I'm not wearing it when I leave the house. I think that just shows how much we adapt and change, and that's in good ways and sometimes in not so good ways. So Claire says, definitely check out The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. Yeah, by Oliver Sacks. Yeah, I've read that before as well. Really, really fascinating. I should put that up on my website, actually. Yeah, if you guys have never been with me before, I haven't even gotten into this yet. I'm a little bit scattered today, y'all, so I apologize for that. But my mental health organization is called More Than You See, and I founded it a couple years ago. The idea behind it is that I compile non-traditional mental health resources and provide them for the community. So if you go to my website, you'll see that I will have like books, TED Talks, podcasts, all sorts of, articles, just like the things that I think are so like, it's important for us to like build our own mental health toolkit, as far as, what are going to be the things that will help us through different difficulties in our lives. And I've just found that it's really important to kind of compile all those things and put it in one place. And so that's why I created More Than You See. if you all check anything out and ever like want to add something to the website, like Claire, thank you for that wonderful suggestion. It actually might be on the website so far, but if it's not, I will absolutely put it up. And thank you so much for the kind words. I really appreciate it. But I think that it's just like we sometimes, I just think it's really important to have agency over your life as far as like, and especially when it comes to your mental health. I think that this is where, establishing boundaries, and just like getting to know yourself really well and getting to know what's going to make you feel good and what's going to make you feel bad. And making sure that that is, kind of at the forefront of your mind, because it's really important. Obviously, our mental health is super important, but no one else is going to take care of our mental health the way that we are. And so, remembering that that's the only thing that you really have control over is you. Exactly, is your actions, the way that you treat others, and then, just like how you show up in the world. I think that sometimes that can be a tricky idea because, especially when it comes to mental health, I think sometimes we feel like our body is actually in control. And, if you wake up and you're feeling depressed or overwhelmed, or you're having anxiety about a situation and that kind of thing, I think that sometimes we can feel like our body is taking over and like our mind is not actually what's causing these mental health difficulties. And that's so true. And I think, though, that it's really important to acknowledge that even though that is so true, we can build in little like fail safes, just like little reminders of things that will kind of like bring us through to the other side. Because I'm a huge proponent of sitting in your feelings and the importance of, if you're going through something, if you're going through something difficult in your life, it is very important to feel your feelings and not just brush them under the rug. But it's also really important to have these little fail safes and ideas of things that will help pull you through, to the other heights, to the other side, so that you're going to feel better in the future. I think that that's really important. Tamara, hi, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. And Elias says, I do not know why I'm sensitive towards others' comments. I think what a person says to me 3 days straight. That's interesting, Elias. I know that you check in a lot, and I appreciate you showing up. I wonder, Elias, have you ever talked to anyone about being diagnosed with OCD, or is that something that you've considered before? Because that's actually something that the doctor that I was listening to on this podcast was talking about. He was specifically talking about brain scans and the way that our brains are when they are when you are interacting with a partner, when you're interacting with a romantic partner, and how sometimes like the way that our brain is functioning and the way that someone else's brain is functioning, like your partner's brain, that it may just not line up, because your brain, the actual brain is so different in some ways. And this one couple that he was talking about was in really bad shape, and he was saying how like the woman would remember things from like years and years and years and years, and that she then, after doing this brain scan, she got diagnosed with OCD, and one of the reasons was because she would sit on something for such a prolonged period of time, and so that was the way that showed up, which I'd never thought of before. So I don't know. Obviously, again, I am not a licensed practitioner or therapist, but maybe that's something that you could look into, because I think it is really important. I mean, I do think that like people's words impact us so much, and there's so many things that will affect us for a very long time. But I think that it is also important to kind of like know ourselves and know if it's something that we are just like, going into going into consciously, like ruminating on something, or if it's subconscious. So Ted says, I have OCD and often hold on to very insignificant criticism, not let go of the thoughts. Yeah, absolutely. And Lisa says, is OCD treatable? That sounds like a friend of mine. Yes, it is. I mean, OCD is, like I said, it's often a brain, it's a chemical imbalance of the brain in some way. Like there's something different about the brain. And so, one of my best friends is on medication for OCD, and it has helped her immensely. And it's for things like this, where she would just focus on something, very specific, and she wouldn't be able to let it go. And now that she's on medication, she says that it still is a little bit of a whisper, where she feels like that's something that she should ruminate on, but she feels like her brain is able to kind of take over and be like, I appreciate that that's what you're saying. But I don't need to ruminate on that, basically. Tamarin says OCD is treatable. Yes, it is. Yeah. And you have experience with mental health in your own realm. Awesome. I'm glad that you are here. George says the subtle art of not giving a fuck, a counterintuitive approach to giving. Yes, definitely getting this. Yeah, that is one of my favorite books, George, and that's a great reminder. I should probably go and reread it right now. I think it's definitely a book, even though it kind of sounds funny, but it's definitely a book about the importance of kind of like figuring out what's important to you and then sticking with it, and setting boundaries for things that don't serve you anymore, and really just like sitting in the things that do serve you. And I think that's really important. Claire says, I struggled with CPTSD for a long time, and ruminating thoughts definitely felt inescapable at one point. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Claire. I completely agree. And I think that that's the thing, is that like sometimes our thoughts, no matter what they are, and no matter where they're coming from or where they're originating, like all of those sorts of things, that's often that can often be the case. And especially if you're going through any kind of mental health difficulty or crisis, we like do this where we replay, conversations in our head, or we replay our feelings in our head, any of those kinds of things. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like I think that sometimes it really is your brain just processing things, because it's important for you to just like take a pause and allow your brain to just think, because that is what it is there for, is to just like, think over things. I think that the difficulty sometimes is when our thoughts prevent us from doing the work that we need to do, or showing up for ourselves or others in life in some way. And that's when sometimes it's important to like kind of figure out what's going on. Of course, I have certainly had experience as well where I'm just sitting in bad feelings, where I'm feeling like I'm depressed for weeks and weeks. And that's actually like why I created More Than You See. It was after I went through a really difficult mental health crisis for many, many months. And then as I was coming out of it, I realized I wanted to build something for others. So yeah. Shannon says, I will have to find that book. You always have a hard time setting boundaries with those you love. Yeah, I mean, Shannon, I think that that's really, that's very, very true. And I think that, I mean, it's difficult because it's important to give like you are the most important person in your life, like you and your feelings and how other people make you feel, just your environment, like that impacts your mental health hugely. And I know that, I mean, this is something like coming out of COVID and going back into the world, there's some people who like, I just don't make me feel good anymore. And it's about setting boundaries with those people and being like, look, maybe we were, super good friends in the past, but I've realized that like this relationship doesn't serve me the way that it used to, or whatever. I don't know, Shannon, if you have a way that you like to do boundaries, because I think that sometimes we think that we need to put up like boundaries with someone as far as like, like, oh, I'm, like, I can't talk to you anymore, and like really set up hard boundaries. And sometimes that is necessary. But sometimes it could just be that that you just need to put a boundary in your own brain, as far as being like, I'm not going to let this person's words affect me. And just like, even consciously just thinking that can be really helpful, I think, in some ways. I don't know if that makes sense. Thank you, Glenn. I am really glad that you were here today. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm so glad that you joined. And please join me again on another Monday at 1 p.m. Oh, good, Claire. I'm so glad that that resonates with you. I mean, I do think that like this is, as we're coming back again, like as we're coming back into the world, and I think that this is something that even in relationship to some of my family members and stuff like that, I think that this has certainly given me a greater understanding of boundaries and what's important, and who and what is good for my mental health, and really figuring out how I can just protect myself, because it's so important, I think, to just like, protect your own mental health, who you are, and how you show up in the world, because you can only help others if you're helping yourself. And I think that's really important. So going back to brain stuff, which was kind of the, conversation that I wanted to kind of look at today, was the idea again that like, yes, coming back to life post-COVID. Agreed, Tamron. It's there's a lot of stuff going on. No, so what I was going to say was, I think that it's really important, or excuse me. So what this podcast was saying, specifically about, as I said, like 20%, he's seen a 20% increase in, all sorts of brain dysfunction, as we're at like with people who had COVID. And one of the reasons for that, I didn't say this before, but obviously one of the reasons for that, or the main reason for that, is the fact that, that COVID in some ways attacked the blood and the circulatory system, and so it's blocking, in some ways it's blocking the oxygen in the blood that your brain needs, in order to function in the most optimum way. And that's why, as this doctor was saying on the podcast, it's so incredibly important to, prioritize your eating, your exercise, your vitamin D, because that is going to directly affect also your circulatory system. And that will then therefore affect your brain, as far as like continuing to pump good blood to your brain, because that's what it really needs. Claire says, I think the transition is beginning to feel pretty strange. Having relied so much on social media and being so engrossed in online communities, this can be attachment that prevents us from readjusting to in-person socializing a little bit. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I do think, though, that there's, I do think that it's okay to feel that way, and also okay for it to take a long period of time in order to get back into things. Yeah, as George says, it's going to take a while. Some will take longer than others to readjust. We just need to be patient and kind with ourselves and others. Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I should say is, another thing that I do is I have a mental health podcast, also called More Than You See. It comes out every Monday. Today's episode will be going live pretty much after this talk today. And that today's episode is about postpartum depression, and how that affects our mental health. So if you have a family, have had a kid, or have a partner who's had a kid, like any of those kind of things, that kind of goes into all of that. But in a previous episode, the reason I brought this up is, in a previous episode, I talked about the world reopening, and how much we need to be kind to ourselves. And also this idea that, like we have, over the past year, we've kind of gotten used to trauma. Like we've kind of gotten used to the pain and suffering that has been going on in the world, and it's completely understandable that it's going to take us some time in order to get back to some semblance of feeling like that trauma is gone. Like that trauma is going to take a while to process, and that's perfectly okay. And I think that that's really key, is to just like give yourself grace when it comes to that. Claire, I'm so glad that that resonates with you, and I really definitely let me know what you think once you take a listen. Thank you, Tamron. That's very kind. Yeah, they make me really happy, honestly. Like I really enjoy giving back to the community in some way, and being able to talk about my own mental health journey. I mean, that's really what all of this is about, is the idea that that we all struggle with, different aspects of mental health. And I think that, as an actor and a filmmaker here in Los Angeles, I think that it's really important for me to continue to share my own story, because I don't ever want someone to feel like they're alone in their struggles, because you're not. You're definitely not alone. And I think it's so important for us to show up for ourselves in that way. So Tamron says, exactly. Talk openly about mental health. Yeah, absolutely, Tamron. I think that's so, so key. Put the podcast address up again. I think it is also, it's also in the comments. So it's right there. And then if you guys click on that link, it will bring you to a page that has like all sorts of different, you can listen on Apple Podcasts, you can listen on Spotify, you can listen on a lot of different things. And as I said, there will be an episode going live later today. It usually goes out in the morning, but that didn't happen today, so it will be going out later today. Ted, that's a really good point. Ted says, why do you keep saying the world reopening? It's just a different world. What is my reason for using these words? I mean, that's a really fantastic point, Ted. Thank you for saying that. I mean, I'm saying reopening because and this is you're gonna like send me into a capitalist spiral here. I mean, I think that the verbiage that is being used in society is that the world is reopening, and that's because it's directly linked to shops, restaurants, amusement parks, all of those sorts of things reopening. And so I think that like we have this idea of the world reopening because those, capitalistic ideas are, or those capitalistic places are actually reopening. But you are completely correct in the fact that it is a completely different world that we are, re-entering. And it's so important, for us to be kind and, to just like understand that this is, just a part of the conversation. You say that I feel saying the word close has a negative spin, makes it harder for mental health. Interesting. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I do agree with you that I think that like the idea that the world is closed and reopen, is that definitely does have a very interesting, idea and context. I think that, again, I just think it comes back to like capitalism and things being closed and then things being reopened. But you're right, because social interactions were not closed. Families were not closed. Like the things that truly mattered, those things were not closed. Everything has just shifted and changed. And this is where, I think that like boundaries comes back into play, and it's hugely important to like figure out what boundaries we're going to set for ourselves and for others. As, even just like our interactions that we're going to have with others, like what kind of interactions are we going to have? How are we going to, show up for yourself, but, still making sure that you're, staying clear to who you are through all of this, and through the world, getting back or entering this new phase, because you're right, it is like a completely new world that we're kind of entering right now. Claire, I became a mental well-being coach throughout this time. Absolutely, anything in relation to supporting mental health really makes your heart happy. Aw, that's so wonderful, Claire. Thank you so much for saying that. I think that there's something really special about the idea that through trauma and hardship we develop purpose in different things. I know that for me, I created more than you see out of my own depression and through my dark time. And I think that, and I created this podcast, my mental health podcast, because of quarantine and because of the idea that I just wanted to connect with people in a new and a different way, in some way that I wasn't connecting with people elsewise, whatever, you know what I'm saying? And so that podcast was definitely like another way for me to give myself purpose. And this is something that I've realized about myself. And this is actually something that I talked about on the last Mighty Talk last Monday, the 7th. If you ever want to go back and rewatch any of these, delightful conversations that we have, all of my past Mighty Talks are on their YouTube channel as well as their Facebook. And on the last Mighty Talk, I talked about the importance of purpose and how I've been feeling a little bit adrift right now in a lot of different areas of my life. And I know that that's because I was kind of like, I just like had a lot of things that were kind of on autopilot, which is good. Like my work is on autopilot. Like I own a business, it's on autopilot. Like I do a lot of things that are on autopilot, but then I also need to like have something that fuels me and drives me. And so it is about like finding these things that give us purpose, that kind of like give us a reason for, getting up. Jessica says, yeah, I've heard a similar phrase from somewhere. Let your mess be your message. I love that, Jessica. I think I'm going to definitely use that in the future. I think that's beautiful. And I completely agree. I think that it's important. Like if there is a way for you to, because okay, let's say this, even if it's like your mess, like the purpose behind your mess or your message behind your mess is to learn about yourself more and just like be true to yourself and figure out who you are. That's also so incredibly important, because in the long run, however you show up in the world and however you interact with people, that affects everyone. So if you are showing up in a more loving, self-aware state of mind, then that will positively affect anyone that you have a future relationship or connection with. So I do think that that's so important, is that like, even if your purpose in your depression is to figure out your stuff and to figure out what is making you feel this way and all those sorts of things, I think that's really important. And yeah, it gives you an increased sense of self-awareness and purpose. I think that is, one thing that trauma and hardships can really help us kind of learn in some ways, is that aspect of ourselves. So I'm glad that resonated with you. I think that it's really, I think that it's really special in a lot of ways. And I think that that's something that's definitely something that I've struggled with this year when it came to COVID, was this idea that, again, let's go back to capitalism, because capitalism, I think, rules so much of our lives, even though we don't completely realize it. Going back to this mentality of a hustle culture, or like that we're only worth what we are creating and what we are, like actually putting out in the world. And that's just not necessarily true. It's really about like you showing up for yourself and doing your best, no matter what that means, or no matter whether or not that's just for you or not for anyone else or anything like that. So you said, I feel like no matter what people try to drag you down, doesn't matter where you are, we need to understand how long we came to be where we are. Yeah, I mean, I do think that some people drag us down, but I do think that that is often an indication of someone else's mental health struggles that they need to work through as well. I think that we hurt and affect others when we're hurting. So yeah. Lisa says, you've been stuck at home, not working, putting a lot of stress on your marriage. I'm sure, Lisa, I'm really sorry to hear that. And I hope that you have some support to work through this. I know that, this year has put a lot of stress on people's marriages in a lot of different ways. And I think that it's really important to remember that, we all need to give ourselves extra kindness and grace right now, because, how you're feeling, I think it's just important to be open and honest with your partner, but also like give them a little bit extra grace, because it has been hard for everyone. Like this year really has been difficult. And I think unfortunately, like we're not through this mentally. Like even if poof, tomorrow, all of COVID disappeared throughout the world, which obviously is not going to happen. We've got a long way to go, unfortunately, still, as far as rolling out vaccines and, like areas that don't have access to them. But I think that it's really key. Excuse me. It's really key to remember that this is going to affect us for a very, very long time, and that's okay. That's just part of being human, and that's just a part of, being in the world and interacting with people. You also add that you had a small apartment, so it's hard to get private space to recoup. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you were saying that you live in New York. I'm curious if you've used parks or any sort of outside space for that, because I think that that's actually one of the things that I love about New York, is the idea that you can find solace outside of your home, and other people are also finding solace outside of their home. I feel like in LA, people are people go home for their safe space and their like serenity. And I feel like in New York, sometimes people have to find that elsewhere. And there's something really beautiful about that. And it has a more communal aspect of the idea of finding serenity in a community space instead of a home space. Jessica says, yeah, that's like the one, if you don't heal what hurt you, you will bleed on people who didn't cut you. Oftentimes people's hurt and actions has so much more to do with them than you. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this is very true, especially when it comes to partners, when it comes to other relationships, when it comes to family members and all of those sorts of things. I mean, talking before about like boundaries, putting up boundaries with family members and stuff. I think that for me, it has been the more that I myself have been in therapy, the more that I have realized what kind of person I am, how I want to show up in the world, and all those sorts of things. The more that I've realized that about myself, the more that I've realized that other people are, other family members and stuff are maybe not doing the work that I'm doing. And that's fine. It's their prerogative. Like no one, you should never force someone else to go to therapy or anything like that. But I think that it just shows a true dedication to your own mental health and journey. And maybe some other people aren't able to show up for themselves and others in that way. And again, it's fine. Like people can do what they need to do. But it is important to kind of like recognize that, and then, set those boundaries if that's going to serve you. So thank you, Lisa, for specifying that you have agoraphobia. I'm sure that also would absolutely make things very hard. And it looks like you try to meditate every morning for 20 minutes. That's wonderful. I think that's really special that you are doing that. And I think that it's sometimes I feel like, I mean, I'm such a huge fan of meditation, as most mental health advocates, practitioners, etc. are. I do think it's so important to sit with ourselves and kind of like allow our brains a chance to refresh and just like sit. But I do know that sometimes that can be scary to just like sit in the emotions and the pain, sometimes for so long. And so, yeah, I commend you for doing that. And, you know, if it serves you and if it's something that you're able to do in the future that does not cause you too much anxiety or overwhelm, you know, see if you can go meditate in an outdoor area, or at least, you know, open a window so that you're next to the sun. I think that it is so important to like get as much natural light as possible. You know, this is something I talk about a lot on my podcast, as well as on these conversations, is the idea that like our social and physical environment impacts our mental health, I think, more than we realize. And that obviously is both our physical environment, so like what surrounds us physically, like walls, plants, all those sorts of things, but also, you know, our social environment. Oh, you have a full spectrum light. Awesome. That's incredible. Good job. That's really, really, I think those are wonderful. And it's so great that you have these tools that you're building to try and, you know, pull yourself out of these funks and stuff. I think that's really important. Yeah. So Melissa says that you're feeling depressed and you have any tips. Thank you for, first of all, showing up today. I mean, I think that it's wonderful that you are here with the community. That is step one, that you are showing up for yourselves and being a part of the community. I think that's super, super important and incredible. I would say, like, I would be curious, you know, what you're doing as far as you know, physical exercise. And I don't even necessarily mean anything strenuous, but, you know, going outside for a walk, doing anything to like get increased oxygen and blood flow to your brain is really, really important and really positively impacts your mental health. You know, this is something that I talk about on my podcast, is the fact that the thing that helped me the most when I was going through my really depressed period was going outside and walking with my dog every day, and just like being outside in nature, just like feeling sun, feeling just like really trying to be in the moment with nature was really special and really brought me out of my funk in a really wonderful way. So I don't know if that's something that you ever do. Obviously, meditation is really important. Nutrition is really important. The first episode of my podcast this season is with a health coach called Leanna Nielsen. It's a really incredible episode if you haven't listened to it yet. And in this episode, she talks about how different foods affect our moods, affect our depression, affect anxiety, how, you know, like how she realized what foods affected her and how she teaches others about, you know, how the food will affect them and what to do about it. And so if you've never listened to that before, and especially if you have some kind of ongoing depression, I would strongly encourage you to check it out, because it might be something that resonates with you. Sumio, thank you for sharing. You know, you said that for many people, you lost your own mother on Friday. I'm so sorry to hear about that. But you need to keep going. Mental health is important. We need to watch out for your own happiness. Yes, it is. I mean, I do think that it's important to watch out for our own happiness. But again, I think that it's also important to sit in our grief and to feel our feelings sometimes, because only with a greater capacity for sadness do we have a greater capacity for happiness. They go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. Elisa says, my dog helps me get out. Thank you for the frank and kind discussion. Absolutely. I mean, Lisa, I'm the same. I don't know what I would do without my dog. He is my greatest companion and is the thing that really, you know, makes me happy and brings me a lot of joy and peace in so many different ways. And yes, definitely, I was sending you so much so much love for the passing of your mother. Thank you to this entire community for showing up for each other like this. It's just so beautiful. I really love it. So Cinti asks how to overcome anxiety. I mean, I think that this is also, similar. I do have to say that obviously a very big part of mental health is your chemical and social and like hormonal makeup, like what brain chemicals are actually going on in your brain. And so if there is something that's physically going on in your brain that's causing OCD, anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, any of these kinds of things, borderline personality disorder, any of those sorts of things, that's where that's where medication is so incredibly important. But I do think that it's important to see if there's something that you can do for yourself first that is about just that's just about like trying to look at things in a more holistic way. So anxiety, I don't know if you were on earlier, but anxiety is specifically our body's reaction to something that may have caused anxiety in the past. Or it could be just that your cortisol levels, which is your stress levels, have increased, and that has caused your body to go into fight or flight. Like sometimes it isn't even something that you feel like you should be anxious about, but you still are having this anxious response. And that's because of your cortisol levels rising. And so I do think that it's really important. This is where, breathing, even just doing, like 5 deep breaths, like in through your nose. If you breathe in through your nose for 3 counts, and then you hold for 3 counts, and then you breathe out for 3 counts, just like that circular breathing. Just do that for 5 breaths. And what that does is it allows your brain and your body to kind of connect and go, everything's okay. We're actually not in danger. There's nothing actually attacking us. It's also really important when you are having anxiety to feel something physical around you, to kind of remind yourself that like you're not actually in physical danger. Now, if you are in physical danger, of course, it's so important to get help, call 911, all of those sorts of things. But oftentimes anxiety is just like our body's reaction to something that isn't actually dangerous. And so it's so key to just like remind ourselves that we are safe and that we are, loved by people, and that's it. And I mean, thank you, the Mighty, for putting that up. If you are feeling like you need help, please call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. And if you are not in the U.S., there is other numbers and stuff for that as well. And the Mighty has a lot of those resources, and my website as well has a lot of resources around what to do if you are feeling like that. So Lisa says, chronic high cortisol levels can lead to inflammation and cancer. Yeah, it's true. And it's really, that's completely true. Bye Lisa. It was wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for being here. So last question, because we gotta go. It's almost 2:00 Pacific Standard Time. So Jake says, what book, website, etc. do you remember for BPD? You got diagnosed, but you don't know much about it. So I actually don't know that much about it, but I do know that the Mighty has had several of these sorts of talks before, specifically about borderline personality disorder. And so I would strongly encourage you to watch one of the other Mighty talks. Again, if you just go to their Facebook page or go to their YouTube, basically where you're watching it right now, and just scroll through their past videos, and I bet you'll find one on BPD. And so there's some like really incredible conversations there. So yeah, I'm so glad that was helpful. Again, you all, thank you so much for being here today. I super appreciate it. Again, my podcast comes out every Monday, and the newest episode will be live in a couple hours, but there's already like 15 episodes for y'all to catch up on if you haven't listened. And I think we cover some really interesting topics. So I strongly encourage you to check that out. Again, thank you everyone for being here. It's always so wonderful to show up and have a conversation with you. Hi, Elias. Wonderful to see you. To my regulars, thank you, Jessica. I really appreciate you being here and for showing up for this talk as well. I super appreciate it. So let me just quickly look at my calendar here. So my next conversation will be on the 28th of June. So that's in 2 weeks at 1 p.m. Melissa, thank you for being here. Please stay strong and remember that we're all here for you and that, like you have a community here, and it's so incredible that you, showed up for us today. So I appreciate it. Jake, thank you. Samio, thank you. Cindy, thank you. Everyone who has been here with me, I really appreciate it. And I will see you guys in 2 weeks at 1 p.m. Right here. Thanks, you guys.